This, I believe you know, is Respect Life Sunday, and I think that's why Father Wersch wanted me to speak about life and 40 Days for Life this weekend. It's a wonderful thing that in the scriptures today, too, that reading from St. Paul describes how holy the womb of a woman is. When Jesus was sent by his Father into this world, that was the place that he sanctified his mother's womb by choosing that as his entry into our world, making that the holiest of places. I know you have a Respect Life group in this parish, and for that reason I know this is a parish that has a great respect for life. I know a story of a father who was going to put his son to bed one night, and the son didn't want to go to bed, but he was obedient, and he went up and got in bed, and 5 minutes later he hears, "Daddy." "What?" "Bring me a drink of water." He said, "I just gave you a drink of water before I put you down. Now settle down and go to sleep." 10 minutes later he hears, "Daddy." "What?" "Bring me a drink of water." He said, I'm not bringing you a drink of water, and if you don't settle down, I'm coming up there and giving you a spanking. 15 minutes later, he hears, "Daddy, Daddy." "Now what?" "When you come up to give me a spanking, will you bring me a drink of water?" I like that story because I don't know if that young man was very wise, but he was persistent. And the story of 40 Days for Life is a story of persistent, peaceful prayer. That's what we're about, and that's what we'd like to introduce to you. It all began in a little town in Texas not so many years ago, 2004. Planned Parenthood announced they were going to build an abortion facility in that little town, and the pro-life people were very upset. Two of them, when they were in college, one was named Abby, the other was named Elizabeth, were very distressed at the number of young women who became unexpectedly pregnant, and they wanted to help them. And one of them, Abby, she joined Planned Parenthood because Planned Parenthood said, well, if you want to help them, this is the way. And when she graduated, she went to work for Planned Parenthood, was a very good administrator, and was elected the Planned Parenthood Employee of the Year for the whole United States. The other one, Elizabeth, she joined a pro-life group. Well, they all came together in this little town. Abby was put in charge of the facility, and the pro-life people, including Elizabeth and a few others, were out in front praying very peacefully. They had decided in prayer that they would choose just 40 days because that number appeared in the Bible so often. Jesus was in the desert for 40 days before he began his public ministry. The Israelites were in the desert for 40 years. They said, we're just going to take 40 days of peaceful prayer and fasting and invite others to join us and keep a quiet, peaceful vigil in front of this facility. So every day Abby came to work that way. "Abby, we're praying for you." Well, Abby was very touched by that because these people were praying to put her out of business. Now, Abby had never seen an abortion. She was the administrator, and she worked out in front. One day, a doctor came. I'm going to read a couple lines from this book I'm holding. It's called Unplanned, and there's copies out at the entranceway of the church. Someone gave it to me several years ago, and I read straight through it. It's a very, very compelling read. In any case, a doctor came one day and said he was going to, let me read his own words, "I'm going to perform an ultrasound-guided abortion on this patient. I need someone to hold the ultrasound probe." Well, they didn't have anyone, so they went out in front and they got Abby, and they said, "Abby, you have to come in the back." Well, she didn't want to go, but she went. She wrote this, "I could not have imagined how the next 10 minutes would shake the foundations of my values and change the course of my life." She held the probe, and until she had a complete image on the screen, she wrote, "I maneuvered a bit to get the best possible image." And there it was. The image was complete. I could see the entire perfect profile of a 12-week-old baby. And I became distressed because I knew what was going to happen. The doctor's instrument entered the woman. The baby moved away from it, and then the baby was gone. She wrote, "That was a human baby fighting for life, a battle that was lost in the blink of an eye. What I have told people for years, what I have believed and taught and defended is a lie." The doctor said, "Abby, are you okay?" She said, "Yes, but I wasn't. I had believed a lie. I had blindly promoted the company line. And this thought came from deep within me, never again, never again." Abby quit her job and went out on the sidewalk and joined the ones who were praying. This became headlines across the country. The wire services picked it up. Planned Parenthood Employee of the Year, now praying to end abortion in front of her own facility. Well, because of that publicity, other towns wrote to the people and said, "How did you do that?" And pro-life people. So other towns began to copy this idea of 40 days of prayer and fasting. In the year, just 10 years ago, they had their first national campaign. That was in 2007, 89 cities, which was remarkable that just in a few years it had spread across the country. One of the cities was Dayton, Ohio, and a lady from our parish was in Dayton, and she joined the campaign there and was so impressed by it, she came back to Cleveland and said, "We have to do it here. We have to do it here." Her name is Mary. She's in church here this morning with us. She'll be in the back of church after Mass. I hope you'll stop to visit her. And so she went down to the pro-life office in Cleveland and said, the diocesan office, and said, "We've got to do this, and will you help me?" They said, "We don't know anything about 40 Days for Life. And who are you? We can't promote something we know nothing about. Is there any priest in our diocese that associated with this?" And that's when she came to me and she said, "Father Dave, will you be the spiritual advisor for 40 Days for Life? You don't have to do anything." That was a lie. I could not encourage people to go out and stand in front of abortion facilities if I hadn't done it myself. And I wasn't comfortable with that idea at all. I'm very comfortable here, but not out on the sidewalk. Mary took me out to the west side to Rocky River, and we prayed on the sidewalk. And she took me out to Painesville at family planning, and we prayed there. And then she took me to the biggest abortion provider in the state of Ohio on Shaker Boulevard, preterm, and we prayed there. And two things happened to me. The first was, it changed my life. The second was, I developed a great sympathy for women who have abortions. When you watch them come there, they're very distraught. They don't want to be there. They're very often forced there by their boyfriends, by their spouse, sometimes by their parents. They think they have no other choice. We'd like to tell them there are other good choices. And our diocese has wonderful facilities to help people in those unusual and difficult times. But they think they have no choice. Mary told me that just last year, she was standing on the sidewalk and a woman was standing there crying. She said, "I already have 3 children, I have no money, no one will help me." Mary said, "I'll help you." And she put her in her car and took her to a very fine pregnancy center that helped her through the 9 months of pregnancy and then beyond that after the baby was born. And so we'd like people to know there are very good choices that they don't know they have right here in our area and in our own diocese. But many have the abortion. Since Roe v. Wade, 60 million abortions. That's a very hard number to get your head around, isn't it? 60 million abortions? We would like those women, and the men involved too, to know that we want them to come for healing and forgiveness. Some of them don't come to church because they think the church is unhappy with them or mad at them because they had an abortion. Our church is all about forgiveness and healing. Even in the scriptures today, I'm looking at that line from the very first reading. If the one who commits wickedness turns from their wickedness and does what is right and love, he will preserve his life. Our whole church is about forgiveness and healing. And again, we have, I'm even sure there are people here who don't know how wonderful facilities we have that would like to help people who have had the unhappy experience of abortion. And because there's been 60 million abortions, it's touched so many lives. And someone had said to me once, or I read once, that our Holy Father, St. John Paul II, was asked once, this has gone on so long, who's going to keep fighting for the pro-life side? Who is going to lead the pro-life ministry? And he answered, he said, it will be people who have had abortions. And we found that true over and over again. I was standing on the sidewalk on Shaker Boulevard one day, and there was a young man standing next to me praying. And after he finished, I turned to him and I said, young man, I'm glad you're here. He said, Father, I have to be here. I brought my girlfriend here when we were in college to get an abortion. I have to be here. He could have taken a line from today's responsorial psalm and made it his own, as many others could. The sins of my youth and my frailties remember not. In your kindness, remember me because of your goodness, O Lord. Remember your mercies, O Lord. That's what our Lord and what our church is all about, mercy and forgiveness. And someone said, well, Father, you always talk about the women who have abortions. What about the men who get them pregnant? Well, we have to reach them, but that's harder. We have to teach men that they don't prove their masculinity by their sexual prowess. We have to teach men that they need to practice self-control, not birth control. We have to teach young men and women to respect each other as persons, not objects for their sexual pleasure. Our Holy Father, when he was in this country, said the same thing. He said, chastity is a very manly virtue. There is perhaps no greater manifestation of a man's virility than that of being in command and control of his passions rather than yielding to them. We need to teach people that, and because our world is teaching them the opposite. Our whole entertainment industry encourages women to present themselves as sexual objects. And they encourage men to prove their masculinity by taking advantage of that and using women. That's a terrible thing, but we all know it's happening. So our enemy is not people who have abortions. Our enemy is not even those who perform the abortions. We want them converted just the way Abby was converted. Our enemy is the devil. The reason I say that is because the devil's work is to destroy Jesus Christ and his church. Now I ask you, if you wanted to destroy our Catholic Church, how would you do it? If you wanted to destroy our whole society, how would you do it? I put it to you, the best way would be to destroy marriage and family life. Why? That's God's plan for our salvation. God created us out of his love for us. All he wants back is that we use our free will to love him back with his kind of love. That is self-sacrificing love. So he created a man and a woman and made them very attractive to each other, so much so that they wanted to give themselves to each other, to sacrifice themselves to each other, to become one. That's what marriage is. And God made it. And then they would know how to love God because of the way they learned how to love each other. And if they're open to new life, when their children are born, the children will learn sacrificial love through their parents. If I asked you, who sacrificed for you in your life to teach you that kind of love? I think most of us would say it was our parents. That's God's plan. That's what marriage is. He made it. And now some of us are trying to say we can define what marriage is for ourselves. No, we can't. So I tell you, the devil, he doesn't try to get you to commit sin. He tries to convince you that what you want to do is not a sin. And that's what's happened in our country. It could almost look like the devil's winning. You don't have to be married to have sex. Just have sex. And it's a good thing, because we like each other. We just move in together. Not because we want to make a lifetime commitment. Oh, no. Not because we want children. Oh, no. We have all kinds of birth control to take care of that. And by the way, if we accidentally get pregnant, well, we have abortion, and that's legal, and that's a good thing. And the devil has convinced a lot of people that all those things are good, and they're destroying marriage and family life in our country. And frankly, we just don't talk enough about it. So you married people, you who are parents, you who are grandparents, you're doing the work of the Lord, and no one gives you much credit for it. But we need your witness. Marriage is the absolute foundation of our society and our church. It's not the greatest sacrament. The Eucharist is the greatest sacrament. Marriage is the foundation sacrament. It's God's plan. And you don't get much credit for doing it. Matter of fact, some people say, they announce they're going to get married, they say, whoa, what do you want to do that for? And if they're married, they say, we want to have children. They say, oh, children. And that's what's happening in our country, and that's what's being proclaimed. We need to speak the truth in love. And we don't do our homosexual brothers and sisters any favor by telling them that their relationship is the same as marriage. It's not. Not because I said so, but because God said so. God made marriage. We have to speak the truth in love. And the truth is, the greatest injustice in our world, in our country today, is the killing of innocent, unborn life. 60 million children have been killed. And it's touched all of our lives. Maybe you had an abortion. Maybe you helped someone get one. Maybe you tried to stop someone from having one, but it affects all our lives. We don't talk about it. We need to talk about it. Our campaign manager named John, he's here in the front row. He'll be at the back of church after Mass too. He's the one that told me that that facility on Shaker Boulevard has the largest number of abortions in the state of Ohio. Thousands. And I talked to a man that lives a few blocks from there. He said, I didn't even know that was going on. I didn't know that place was there. Maybe you didn't either. It reminded me a little bit like the towns in Germany and in Poland where there were Nazi death camps. And the people near there after the war would say, we didn't know that was going on. We didn't know those places were there. But when the American troops liberated those towns, they made the people in the town walk through the death camps to see all the heaped up bodies that hadn't been burned yet. 6 million. Well, my brothers and sisters, there's been 60 million babies' bodies heaped up, but we cannot show you pictures of them. And so we come here to ask you to join us in this campaign to end this tragedy through prayer and fasting. I mentioned John will be at the back afterwards. I would encourage you when you leave to give us your email address. And John will send you wonderful emails telling more about this campaign with a lot of information we don't have time to give you here. How we do it, when we do it, how you sign up for it. So we urge you to take the time to stop and give us your email address. There are 3 things during the campaign, by the way, started on September 27th, this week. It will end on November the 5th. When you leave church today, you'll be given a little prayer card written by one of the priests in our diocese. We'll ask you to say this prayer for the remainder of the 40 days. That's not too hard, and I think but God hears our prayers. Make these prayers from the heart. We'd ask you to fast for 1 day. That's not easy. But Jesus said some demons are only driven out by prayer and fasting. We'd ask you to do that. Yeah, maybe you'd fast the whole time, but at least 1 day. The third thing is that you'd give us 1 hour on the sidewalk. Father, I can't do that. I wouldn't know where to go. I'd be too afraid. So was I. In one parish, a man put in the bulletin, he said, I have a van, meet me Saturday morning in the parking lot. I'll drive, we'll go there, spend an hour praying, I'll drive you home. That's happened across our diocese. It doesn't take too long to get there. So, very grateful that you've given me this time. I'd like to just give you a couple of the indication of how God has blessed us. I said that in 2007, the campaign was held in 89 cities. Do you know that this past year there were campaigns in 715 cities in 44 countries? That's how God has blessed us. Abby quit her job at the first campaign. Since then, 154 abortion workers have quit their jobs, and Abby gives retreats to them. No one wants to work in the abortion industry, really. 90 abortion facilities have closed, one of them here on the west side of Cleveland, since we've had campaigns. That one in College Station, Texas, it closed after several campaigns. 40 Days for Life bought it and now makes it their national headquarters. Isn't that providential? But the greatest statistic of all is that we have 13,000 children have been saved because of these campaigns and God's grace. How do we know that? We only count the ones where the woman says, I changed my mind, I'm keeping the baby. Isn't that today's gospel? When the young man said, no, I'm not going into the vineyard, but then he changed his mind and he went. I'm very grateful for you to give me these, maybe a little too long today, but I'd like to conclude with a reflection on when life begins and is that really a person that the woman's carrying in her womb, by reflecting for just a moment on the Blessed Virgin Mary. When Mary was conceived in the womb of her mother, St. Anne, our church teaches officially that Mary was free from original sin from the first moment of conception. When does life begin? The first moment of conception. Is that really a person? Well, when the angel Gabriel came to Mary and asked her to be the mother of God's Son, she said yes. At that moment, the second person of the Blessed Trinity became present in the womb of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Is that a person? The second person of the Blessed Trinity? And when Mary went to visit her cousin Elizabeth, Elizabeth said, the moment your greeting sounded in my ears, the baby in my womb leaped for joy. My brothers and sisters, our prayer is that every baby conceived will leap for joy in his or her mother's womb because the mother will let the baby be born. And a few years later, annoy them in the middle of the night calling out, Daddy. And then be brought here to church to that beautiful baptistry and be baptized. And then cry out, Abba, Father, thank you.